All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first professional development webinar offered through the Research and Theory Division of AECT. I am Lucas Vasconcelos, Assistant Professor of Learning, Design, and Technologies at the University of South Carolina. And I'm honored to introduce to you a great team of scholars who will talk to us about artificial intelligence, considerations for the field of instructional design. First, we have Dr. Lynn Lipsmeyer, professor at Southern Methodist University, Dr. Fengfeng, professor at Florida State University, and then Dr. George Veletsianos, professor of Royal Roads University. I will share the screen with the slides. And can you see the screen? Okay, awesome. So the floor is all yours.
Oh, Lucas, do you want me to start?
Sure, you can go.
Yeah.
You can go.
Oh, okay. Oh, Fengfeng, would you like to start?
No, I can be after you since my very simplistic 2 slides are after your slides.
Okay. Okay, I'll start. Well, thank you so much, Lucas, for inviting us to have this conversation with the group of scholars here. Actually, a lot of experts here. And I was talking with Lucas earlier. We all know a little bit about artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence, the conversations are changing every day. And so I really don't see myself as sort of presenting more as having this opportunity to have the conversation with everyone here. So this morning I put out a few slides, just as a starting point for us to have the conversation. So Lucas, do I have the control of the slide, or you have the control of the slide? Okay, thank you, Lucas. So I thought we start, since this is from about instructional design. So I thought just to put a slide out there, just sort of say what is instructional design, sort of set as I guess the theory. When we talk about instructional design, we talk about creating more engaged, personalized, effective learning experiences for the learners, while considering ethics and especially in the context of artificial intelligence. And we are also there with a lot of instructional design models. I just put out a few here. Merrill's principles of instruction, Gagne's 9 events of instruction, and I also threw in a few others that we may not really see as instructional design models, but then we talk about them in interdisciplinary areas of study, TPAC model that you're all familiar with probably as well, and community of inquiry. That's more sort of a model that a lot of people who design online learning environment talk about, and also itself has a big group of scholars who continue to update this model. And I also thought through design-based implementation research. Dr. Reeves is here as well. So I thought to put that there because most other models focus more on the design process, while in a design-based research sort of has more of an emphasis on the research aspect, which, I mean, the other models have implicitly include them as well, but this has really the focus on the research. And it, as you can see, as you know, all these models overlap, right? We all are looking at all these cycles of these, analyzing, designing, developing, implementing, evaluating, reflecting process. So Lucas, can you go to the next slide? So I just put some, this visual image of these models so that, sort of it's easier to see, these cycles that we've been talking about for a long, long time. Next slide, please. So in terms of artificial intelligence integration into instructional design, and there are different things also to consider as you look at these bullets that I put here. Again, they are very much whether you see artificial intelligence as a kind of technology or as the water or air, we breathe. There are a lot of sort of overlapping issues that we're looking at, right? So first, we need to understand AI capabilities and limitations. And again, the conversations change every day. The capabilities change every day. The ability like GPT-4, as even today, there are new reports about, the new capabilities. But for now, the ability to recognize the objects, images, videos, translate languages, play complicated games, generate ideas, and so forth. And the limitations, when things are happening right now, the scenarios that are not on the internet, AI may not be able to create or generate quickly. The originality and the common sense and the biases. So as instructional designers, not all of us have the expertise in computer science. I don't. So, when it comes to artificial intelligence, there are technical aspects that we need to think about. We need to collaborate with people who are more familiar with the technical aspects or the data aspects or the algorithms. And then opportunities, what can we do? What aspects of AI can be used for instructional design purposes? And then the element that I'm personally most excited about is the interactions and collaborations between artificial intelligence and human input. Where does AI come in? Where do we come in as human? And then the aspects of ethical use, biases, and then the continued evaluation improvement of the strategies, solutions we come up with AI. Next slide, please. So, I want to highlight the ethical considerations. We can have more conversations about it. Just yesterday, Dr. Reeves sent the three of us this YouTube video about AI dilemma. If you haven't watched it, I got to watch it yesterday. And, the video brought about a lot of things that probably the general public haven't been thinking about. So, we all are sort of hearing, experiencing, the spectrum of emotions about ChatGPT. Sometimes maybe the issue is that we may be afraid or scared of things that may not be that scary, but at the same time, we are not aware of things that actually are more scary. So the AI literacy is the part, again, it's continuous changing, but it's something I think we, as instructional designers, we need to be engaged. There are conversations about banning AI or, so I guess when I hear that kind of conversation, for me, number one, so the banning probably has more impact. It's not going to affect people who have access, and it's going to impact more on the people who don't have access. And also the banning whom, right? And who needs to be engaged. For me, as teachers, as instructional designers, to me, we need to be more engaged rather than maybe the corporate people should be, the Microsoft should be, if we talk about banning, it should be putting constraint on them rather than putting constraint on the teachers or instructional designers or the other stakeholders. So Lucas, next one, please. And I thought to put a few slides about maybe the capabilities and things instructional designers can think about to take advantage of artificial intelligence. Of course, what comes first is the large amount of data, data analytics. And because of the large, we are able to collect large amount of data on learner behavior, learner performance, then we can make better, more informed decisions about learners, about course design, about course delivery. Oh, the PowerPoint just disappeared.
One second. Can you see it now?
I can see it now, yeah. Can you move on to the next, please? So related to the data, again, I'll go through quickly. The personalization is something that we're all excited about, personalized learning, because we now can use the data to understand better of the learner's needs, preferences. We have learner data. We can have the ability to tailor the learning content, activities, and assessments to the learners. Next, please. And real-time feedback, it's possible to provide real-time feedback. It disappeared again.
Not sure what's going on.
And so the chatbots feedback, virtual assistant feedback, again, are the things that are most exciting and can be most disturbing. So we can have conversation about this later. Mm-hmm. And next one, please. And collaboration, again, is a topic I'm most excited of all. AI can be a medium for collaboration, partner with learners, facilitate communication, sharing resources, and providing insights. Next one, please. And then, of course, AI is very good at pattern recognition, routine tasks. So with the AI assistance, we might be able to hopefully be able to free up the time that for the instructors, for the learners, for the teachers to focus on real learning activities. And next one, please. So I think this is Fengfeng's slide, so I'm going to stop here.
Yes, thank you, Lingling. I think Lingling did a great job providing a good, detailed overview about what we can consider in trying to explore as an instructional designer. I just have 2 slides, but I'm thinking there are quite a few very foundational and provocative questions for us to consider as either designer or the researcher or maybe the instructor of the education. And I think I also want to share some of my personal experience as maybe one of the users and designers trying to use AI integrated learning systems and environments for several years so far. So I'm never claiming myself as an expert. And like what Lingling said, I really look forward to this continuing conversation with everyone, with my colleagues, with my peers, with my students about what could we do and why we should do and what it is about AI integrated, AI powered, AI-based teaching and learning. But there are quite a few questions I think everyone has been wondering about nowadays, from mass media, from our own social network group, and also from our research team. And first one is, what is AI? I think a lot of time you come to AI because you think ChatGPT. I have to say that ChatGPT is only one good user case to illustrate what AI can do from a natural language processing and text input perspective. But AI is much more than that. And with all these years of technology development in a very unexpected speed, I think the scope or the boundaries of AI is really changing daily. So there can be a technical boundary about AI, there can be conceptual boundary about AI, but I want to read aloud one of the commonly accepted and adopted definition for AI from generate the machine learning and the CS fields. So AI for them usually means computational systems that interpret external data, learn from such data, and use those learnings to achieve specific goals and tasks through flexible adaptation. So this definition is by Kaplan and Helen in 2019 in one of the paper called Siri in My Hand, Who's the Fairest in the Land? So there's a long title, but this one is actually interesting because they are trying to discussing the scope or boundary of AI from economics and business perspective. And you can tell that such kind of AI or ChatGPT trend is kind of push a lot from the business and industry rather than from the machine learning or data science or from education field. And that may mean something, right? There are a lot of interesting initiatives involved in AI. But one thing we should be very careful about reading this kind of definition is AI by nature is teachable, can learn by itself from data. And AI is data hungry, as a lot of us know. But those data actually is not just because they are static input that kind of create a model, but because they can be regenerated and reused by AI to create meta-learning mechanism to self-improve. And that's what we expected about AI. So we should not be surprised that AI can learn by itself. And because of that definition, now a lot of us wonder about, so what should AI do? I remember 2 years ago when we started one of the projects about teaching simulation-based teacher training in our open-ended VI platform. We start to use GPT-2, at that time 2020, to kind of drive the virtual student agent. We want to simulate a student who will be able to involve in reciprocal interaction and act as an environmental stimuli to prompt pre-service teacher. So we will be able to engage the pre-service teachers in understanding, diagnosing, and scaffolding the students. And so we want to use a large language model to drive such kind of reciprocal interaction instead of using rule-based or decision tree or any kind of finite state oriented learning approach. So we use this large language model. At that time, we feel like, wow, there's still something missing there. Like our virtual student agent would not be able to reason. Like a lot of people believe that AI cannot reason. AI does not have sensibility. They don't understand. We just feed the mindset into this language model. So at that time, we still have that conception when we use the GPT-2. But when we shift to GPT-3, 1 year later, our belief as the designer totally changed. This large language model driven student agent will be able to reason by synthesizing the patterns or delineating the patterns from all this information that we have been used to train them. And a lot of time we think, oh, maybe they are not able to memorize. So one kind of frequently cited issue with the previous conception about AI is they don't have memory. But if you read the recent papers from machine learning, from those data scientists, there are multiple mechanisms to create memory streams for language model-driven AI. We will be able to create observation-based reflection, observation of reflection-based planning, and refine of the planning for this AI-driven agents. So apparently they could reason. I mean, to what extent we don't know, but they start to reason. And then we also think, oh, okay, maybe AI cannot be creative, cannot come up with original idea. Well, again, that kind of misconception may need to be refined when we have those AIs trying to simulate different patterns of arts, different patterns of so-called digital media pieces that we don't think AI can do. And of course, they need to be fed into different kind of masterpieces, and they kind of refine that and create and synthesis of different masterpieces. But depends on how you define originality and creative. I think AI is simulating a novice artist and creative, something that is copycating, but also have refinement and certain kind of generation. So AI can be creative. And then also AI can adapt itself, as we have seen. It can self-learn. In the old days, we talked about few shot, now it's zero shot. We think that AI will not be able to handle unseen scenario like what Lenin said. Well, I used to believe that too, but nowadays I'm not so sure. The meta-learning, actually one of the big goal of meta-learning mechanism in AI training is to be able to enable AI to transfer the task across scenarios, across settings. And one way they can do it is like how we train the younger kids. It's using prompting. They're using one of the method called train of thought prompting. And that has been used a lot, and people call such kind of prompting called whisperer, right? You can have AI whisperer. So you're trying to train this kind of AI by prompting them, by chunk such kind of the scenarios, way of thinking into small elements, and you ask them, okay, each sub chunk, and they are studying to pick up this pattern and be able to transfer learning and analyze the scenario that's novel, and using a small element to recreate a better and newer understanding about new scenario, new task. It is happening that way. So a lot of time is maybe we should question I should question myself is, do I really know what the boundary or limits of AI can be? Because every day when I read every new article about this AI related discovery, identification, I become to be very conscious that I know nothing about what AI's boundary is, because people are smart in training and teach this learning machines to become self-learning and become original, to become reasoning and become really someone worry is, are they going to develop what people call artificial general intelligence? And what is artificial general intelligence? It just means this machines are going to simulate or demonstrate the behaviors that is indistinguishable from human in both cognitive, social, and emotional intelligence, all aspects. So one of my projects is trying to develop training and intervention for children with autism. So a lot of times the social intelligence and emotional intelligence are kind of key skills we're trying to train the kids or train learners. Well, we originally think that AI does not have emotion, right? It does not have theory of mind. But if you read the recent articles, especially about human AI interaction, and they are talking about mutual theory of mind training for AI. So apparently AI can have the social intelligence as long as we know how to train it using data, how to refine it, using specific data set that is related to social emotional intelligence, or add-on layer that can be like how we train them with memory string. We can add on a layer of so-called social intelligence protocols based on the large language model. So things as are possible. I have to correct myself again and again is that we are seeing that day coming. potentially that we may not be able to distinguish what AI can do and what human can do for certain levels to a certain extent. So now that comes to the designer question is, should we stop it, right? Should we just stop and like ban AI integrated learning system or AI integrated tools? I think that question is beyond what I can do or what we can do. As again, as I said, there are a lot of initiative pushing this trend of AI. It's beyond education. It's beyond what the teacher, designer of instructional systems or the policymaker of educational system can do. So I think pragmatically, I would think about is why and how we should design this different level of AI infusing, AI power, or AI-based learning experience and environment. I think maybe one of the big concepts we could think about is human-computer or human-AI collaboration or human-computer interaction. I think we should still be very much human-centered, that's for sure. But the issue is, come back to what we need as the human in our daily teaching, in our daily classroom for our kids, is how can we help ourselves using such kind of available tools that potentially they can help reason, they can help prompt, they can help manage, they can help discipline for us as do we want to use it, right? How? But also we want to be very careful as we understand that it's always problem driven, it's always goal driven is why? I noticed that a lot of my students, I'm just talking about my students or from my team perspective, is that I have a lot of students who tend to, and which is usually what happened with learning technologies is we are trend driven, right? Okay, so today everyone is talking about ChatGPT. Okay, everyone is going to do ChatGPT. Tomorrow we're going to talk about maybe the other kind of chatbot or maybe the other kind of trendy topics. So we're so driven by this kind of the trends, and we are not really focusing on foundational questions about what is teaching and learning, what kind of talents are we preparing. Honestly, I feel concerned about AI a lot. It's because I don't know what kind of future talent, future human intelligence we're trying to scaffold and usher here as an instructional designer, as an educator, because I feel like, God, how can I have our students compete with AI if the AI has the memory? And of course, AI don't feel tired. And AI will be always happy, motivated to learn with the pattern delineation, with the pattern generalization, with the pattern refinement in comparison to human students who can be tired, who can be motivated by different things and tend to be distracted and may not enjoy thinking in the end. So if they are going to be rely on an AI, if AI become assistive, are we creating the generation of the students or learners who do not think, do not need to think? That's something concerning. That is something that I think we should think about is what kind of future talents, what kind of future workforce are we preparing? And of course, a lot of people are talking about, okay, some jobs will be killed. That could be. But I also believe that some jobs will be created. So defining, like what instructional designers would do is defining the job, defining what the future workforce should also be something we consider if we have a full understanding about what AI should be, can be, and why. Then we will be able to kind of gear up our initiatives in designing, transforming, and preparing our workforce preparation or development needs. So again, a lot of questions for me to wonder about, but I think this should be all the questions that we should consider as a designer or an educator. So next slide, please. Now, also, I know a lot of time we voice about concerns, but I also want to focus on boundaries. Boundaries for me may be another way to say solutions for those concerns. So first one is a lot of people, including that video that Tom has shared with us, is wonder is how do we define human intelligence? And we are worried that we're going to lose our identity as humanity from first cognition perspective, right? We are always the agent of this external world. We design what we need. We want this environment to serve us. So we have always been at this top of this pyramid in this ecosystem when we interact with the external environment, because we are intelligent, we learn, we have a language, we can communicate. And that's always how we define us as human beings. And now with this artificial intelligence coming now, we start to wonder about identification. So I think one of the potential boundary for such kind of human intelligence identity concern is, let's really help ourselves and help our students or learners really consider what we believe should be and can be intelligence. And a lot of time in the old days, we're talking about learning is not memorization. Learning should be critical thinking. Now, it should be beyond critical thinking if AI can do critical thinking. So what should we learn? What should we develop? And what should we involve? And of course, I think everyone have to understand that sometimes with these tools come, you may create a division in the society. You may have a stronger class division. So potentially, you may have the people who know how to engineer AI versus who do not. So would that create some kind of division? So in a lot of times, I think we should come back to this boundary is maybe let's think about how we can have this intelligence explainable or tractable. And I think there is a movement from AI field is they want explainable AI. They want the AI that would be ethically grounded. So it's instead of having the black box data-driven approach, we should add on the human expert-driven and potentially architecture-driven approach that can potentially balance data and also the expert perspective or monitoring from human. In other words, we still need the human's agency or input in when we're creating this kind of the intelligence. And finally is I know a lot of educational measurement people always want to have generalization, right? We want power to generalize one model to the other kind of fields, to the other kind of setting, to the other kind of context. But one thing like what Lynn mentioned is be careful about bias. So a lot of data that has been fed into or trained such kind of model for AI is always from a specific subset of population that potentially can create bias and stereotype. So maybe we should come back instead of say generalization, we should focus on contextualization. Or when we talk about generalization, that should be a generalization with a boundary. To whom, when, how, and why. So we should not always say, oh, we want to come up with a model that will be good for the general population. Maybe we should not, and we cannot. We will only just focus on deep instead of going wide. Maybe that helps. And finally, about data, because AI, of course, is data hungry. But how do we define data? What kind of data? What are the basic characteristics for the data that's going to drive and train and validate such kind of AI model? Where are they? Do we share the sources of the data? Can we co-monitor? Can we co-define and refine the data sources? And if we can, how do we protect the privacy? How do we make sure that infrastructure not only is just for the dissemination, but also for protection? And again, that come back to the policy is who are going to make those policy and ethics-driven protocols. So all this, again, can be potential boundaries, but I think we need a community input and interdisciplinary effort to kind of work with such kind of data infrastructure. So I think that would be all what I want to say.
George, you can go ahead and share your slides.
Can you see my slides? Okay, perfect. I appreciate the intellectual humility of my colleagues and sort of the invitation to think about this with sort of the understanding that we don't all know the details about these new technologies, or the details around a lot of the developments that are happening. So what I thought I would do is essentially begin by discussing frames with which I approach this topic. Let's see. Before I do that, though, I'd like to acknowledge that Railroad University and my neighborhood are on the traditional lands of the Kwasapsam and Lekwangan ancestors and families who have lived here for thousands of years. And indigenous communities have long lived on this land, and I'm grateful to live and work here. And to relate this to our conversation today, I think it is important to remember sort of the data that AI tools are typically trained on, right? And one of the questions that we might be able to ask here is to say, do they represent all sorts of knowledge in the same way in the outputs that they generate, for example? Do they represent indigenous knowledge? Do they represent non-Western knowledge, and in what ways? And sort of beginning with this is to begin with understanding that when we approach these technologies, I think we need to approach them with understanding that they represent particular worldviews and particular values. And I'll tell you how that relates to the rest of my presentation in a moment. So first of all, I'd like to say that I have a bit of an ambivalent relationship with AI. I've studied AI. I was working with pedagogical agents around 2004, 2005, spent many years on that, essentially trying to understand what are the conversations that students have with conversational agents. Sort of what questions do they ask? How do they approach AI? Are they being polite? What are the social relationships there? Those sorts of questions. And I love that contemporary tools can, save me time. They can efficiently generate text or help me brainstorm about different topics. I love how they can help instructional designers, for instance, quickly generate content and rubrics and collaborate with them. But I'm also concerned about the ways in which seemingly all of our conversations these days seem to center on AI. Here's a screenshot from a news article from yesterday. The ASU GSV Summit was happening over the last couple of days. And this was one of the sort of typical headlines that appeared. AI will fundamentally change education. And we've heard sort of these stories before, right? This prevalence of techno-deterministic thinking in our field, that the idea that AI will change education, that prior technologies would also do that, right? We've heard the same about blockchain, we've heard the same about virtual reality, radio, TV, and so on and so forth. And perhaps this time is different, right? Perhaps this is actually the technology that has so much more power than other ones, but perhaps it isn't, perhaps it's the same. At the same time, perhaps this time it's not the technology itself, but the state in which we find ourselves in the world. So in thinking about that, I wanted to talk about sort of 4 helpful frameworks with which to approach AI, or with which I approach AI in this time. The first frame that you all might be familiar with, I'm glad that Dr. Tom Reeves is with us here today, is to focus on problems rather than technologies. And at the heart of this is the recommendation that focusing on problems relating to learning and human development instead of things is important. The first idea is socially responsible research, meaning doing scholarship that addresses learning and human development problems that take away from the quality of life for individuals and groups. And the second idea here is on identifying and working towards solving problems. Tom and his colleagues, and Lynn, who presented first here, worked with Tom in a paper published a couple of years ago. And they ask, what is the problem and how can we solve it, and what new knowledge can be derived from that solution? And as instructional designers, we have a variety of sort of tools in our toolkit, right? Technology is one of them, but we can address problems by changing processes, by removing barriers, and so on and so forth. So here's an example or a list of examples of problems that aren't things. Things like animosity and conciliation, lack of access to education, access to scholarly knowledge, the unaffordability of education, attrition and degree non-completion, harassment, racism, sexism, all sorts of isms, poverty. These are the sorts of problems that Tom and colleagues are imagining. What are things? Things are tools like AI, games, modality, the idea that in person is better or worse than online, virtual characters, iPads, iPhones, anyway, pick a kind of technology. Those are the sorts of things that are imagined when we think of sort of tools addressing or tools improving education. The next frame that I I approach my own work with is the idea of resisting techno-solutionism. Techno-solutionism refers to the idea of imagining technology as a solution to all sorts of problems that education is facing. And here's one. ChatGPT caught the world by storm. In an EDUCAUSE quick poll a couple months ago, with faculty and education administrators, most people said that student cheating is one of their major concerns with this technology. And one way that we have seen over the last month or so to address that is through more technology, right? AI text detectors, Turnitin released its own text detector last week. But there were other tools before that, like GPT-0 and Zero-GPT. And then there's other platforms that basically promise to rewrite AI text to avoid this detection. And why am I bringing this up? Because using technology to solve the problems that technology causes leads to more changes in technology and then requires new technology, which then becomes sort of a losing arms race, especially for educators and students. But thinking of solutions more broadly can maybe help us begin develop more sort of trusting relationships with our students and solutions that don't necessarily rely on technology. But to do this, we can imagine or begin to imagine solutions to the problems of cheating in more broad ways. Technologies that promise to catch students cheating essentially take on a policing role, right? They say, we're going to police students and figure out if this text is written by AI. And what they essentially do is cultivate a culture of suspicion, where they subject all of our learners to unwarranted scrutiny and checking. And sure, educators have multiple roles in their classrooms. One of those roles might be to police students, but I would suggest that that is not our main role. And there are alternatives like redesigning assessments and fostering cultures of trust and good relationships with our students. The third frame that I would like to suggest, and I'm moving quickly here just to give some space for conversation, is to adopt an ecological lens to teaching and learning. And my colleagues alluded to this. Our field most often deals with sort of the micro level. How do we improve a learning environment? What's the impact of a particular pedagogy on learning? How do we improve motivation? How do we reduce attrition, and so on and so forth? By doing this, however, we emphasize teaching, learning, education as sort of a silver bullet. And we know that there are other approaches that don't necessarily involve teaching, learning that might address the problems that our societies are facing. To do that, we need to sort of foster cross-disciplinary relationships with other areas and view our field as broader than just focusing on teaching and learning. Laura Sternwich at the University of South Africa suggests, for example, a number of approaches that we can take to the adoption of technology in education more broadly. She suggests resisting it when there are technologies that might be harmful, researching it, which we've talked about quite a lot, regulating it, figuring out its limits and how, for example, corporations need to behave in particular ways, and reimagining it, thinking about it in different ways and what it can do to contribute meaningfully to human life rather than, say, the bottom line of corporations. The fourth and last frame that I'd like to suggest is the idea of hopeful education futures. There's lots of work that has tearing around what the future of education should look like. There's a quote from a paper from 2010 that essentially says the next 25 years will challenge our current organization of education, and they will require the development of new approaches to curriculum, cross-institutional relationships, workforce development, and so on. Even though this was written in 2010, it rings true today, largely because of developments in AI that we have seen recently. But we also know that education systems broadly are in crisis, not only because of AI, but of all sorts of other pressures that they're facing, right? The ongoing pandemic, late-stage capitalism, the Russian war against Ukraine, economic concerns, climate catastrophe, confidence in higher education declining. All of these pressures are pressures facing our education systems. So when we try to imagine what our future education systems look like, I would suggest that we focus on developing hopeful education futures that may or may not embed AI, but center our imagination on the hopeful parts rather than on the technological part. And of course, AI may be part of those futures, but that shouldn't be our priority. Some questions that I think are important for us are to ask, what do those hopeful futures look like? What's the role of technology there? How do we co-create them with learners and with those people that are most impacted by those futures? What do futures where climate collapse is real look like for our children? What does that mean for our universities and our schools? My colleagues and I are editing a special issue on the topic of education futures that may or may not include AI. I can circulate the link, but I'm just going to end there and give some space for conversation.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. If you have questions, we have over 100 people in this call. So if you have questions, you can type them in the chat and we will address them. Yes, we can share the slides later, Fatima. To get us started, I have a question. So how do you think that AI can help the design of personalized learning experiences for students?
I can go ahead since I think there can mount of solutions. I mean, depends on how you want to use the AI as either a learning partner or a cheerleader or a coach or mentor. Or maybe just a kind of diagnostic service, right? Because nowadays, I think a lot of people have been putting what the people call dashboard for teachers dashboard for students as a naturalistic extension of learning analytics. So like we collect all kinds of behavioral, multimodal, conversation, team performance data, and then we synthesized it. And we're going to create some kind of analysis about this behavioral, real-time, data-driven diagnosis. And hopefully the teachers will have the cognitive resources to check the dashboard during the teaching and education or classroom management, and will be able to better geared their disciplinary classroom management strategy or educational strategies based on this dashboard. But another kind of mechanism is instead of the dashboard serving teachers, we can have students self-paced, self-regulate themselves.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, you couldn't see me. I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm writing.
Sorry.
All right. Yeah, no problem. I thought that's a question, no comment. So that can be one way that we are familiar with. But another way is maybe we can use, I have been personally using ChatGPT as a learning partner, right? I don't have that much time to search for the information about meta-learning mechanism to have the most updated articles from that. ChatGPT can do that for you, but of course, I don't fully trust the ChatGPT because I don't know what kind of inclusion or selection criterion I have. So I only consider ChatGPT in this case as a learning partner, right? You could have students doing that way as well. But of course, you can also have mentor or the other kind of the role for this AI-driven system to adaptively adjust the way of presentation, the feedback, and potentially cheerleading, emotional feedback, emotional regulation message or prompting, doing this or post or before the learning process. So again, as long as we know what the AI can do and think about what you need for your learning processes, I think AI can do a lot different kind of potential avenues to personalize or individualizing the teaching and learning process.
So the idea of the teaching machine has been with us for decades, right? It's a long history in our field where we imagine tools teaching our students, improving efficiencies, enabling teachers to focus their efforts on sort of more important activities. But I love the work of Daniel Schwartz at Stanford, who develops teachable agents, right? And teachable agents is this idea that we develop tools and AI that is taught by the learner, as opposed to generating information and insights for the learner, right? So the student interacts with them and the agent asks questions, right? Well, how did you solve this? Like, why did you multiply instead of dividing? Tell me more about this. So, the role there is different, right? It's the relationship is different. It's the student in the role of the teacher instead of the tool in the role of the teacher. So there's, like Fengfeng was saying, there's lots of different roles that these tools can take. And I in particular like that role because of how I see tools are functioning in the learning environment.
Thank you.
So I remember when I was a student, we started with the conversation about computer as tutor, tutee, or tool. So there's that dynamic there. And from constructivist perspective, it's almost always good to have the students, the learners, to be the tutors, right? To teach the tools. I think it's actually a very difficult conversation. I'm just thinking two contexts I was thinking about. One is the medical field, right? When you see the doctors having a lot of tools available for them to help them so that they can make informed decisions for their patients. So I can see the power with all this AI, whether it's AI or other emerging technologies that can really be very powerful assistants to help teachers and coaches to help the learners, especially learners who may not have the capacity to have their own ownership in their own learning for whatever the reason, right? They are too young, or they have certain challenges. I'm thinking like my own son who has ADHD, right? Just cannot be focused. So there needs someone who is there to tell him he need to come back to be focused. So there are different contexts. So that's one, the powerful assistant that can help there. Another context I'm thinking about is really the more you know about the learner, the more you may be able to help the learner. However, the more you know about the learner, then there's a privacy issue. There are, the learner can lose control over there. So that's another thing I thought to put out there.
Thank you. We have another question from Frank Jamieson. How would you compare the introduction of large learning models to the development of the internet in terms of how it will change education?
I'm not quite sure I understand that question about large learning model. Do you mean language models or?
Not sure. Is Frank
Yeah,
here?
is it usually? Okay, yeah. I think large language model can happen. It's because internet is there. Because of internet, because everyone are capable of contributing information, and everyone can be tracked and creating a lot of data. And all this kind of communication, sharing, archiving, and dissemination of the data or information becomes available. Now that drives the AI, because AI is such a data hungering machine that is can be training and can be teachable in its learning. And then the large language model comes up. So I think they are connected. I think it's going to dramatically, yeah, as I said, I think it's going to dramatically not only just change approach of teaching and learning, but in the end is what are we teaching and learning? Or what is teaching and learning in general? What is intelligence for human?
Thank you. Dennis Beck said, I work with a lot of computer science colleagues who are enthused about the potential of AI in their field and in education in general. Interestingly, none of them are concerned with how we treat AI, often advocating prompt strategies that include bullying behaviors and other such behaviors towards the AI. Can you comment on the potential impact of these behaviors and how AI is developed and the ethical implications in general? Who would like to take that one?
I'll start. This is something actually that's happening in our house, with Alexa, with Siri, and a lot of times, I have, oh my gosh, she's just responding to me now. But so the thing is, I have a 13-year-old son. Sometimes he just like, shut up, because the machine there just cannot stop talking. And we tell him, well, you got to be gentle, be nice, because all that will become data. And we don't want the data to come back to be all rude. So it's not necessarily the machine itself. I don't think, at least for now, I'm not concerned about machine feelings hurt. What I'm concerned is all that data will get there and then it will come back to us.
All right. We are almost out of time, so we have time for one last question. Can you discuss some academic guidelines or policies of higher ed on AI in the area of academic integrity?
Oh, I'll jump on this one just because I really like this question, and I think it's a question that invites us to rethink our relationships with students. Many of the tools that we use for academic integrity are essentially surveillance technologies, right? They surveil student writing and try to catch students doing things that are that we consider inappropriate. The way that I would suggest we begin addressing the issue of cheating is through more conversations with students to understand, for example, the meaning behind academic integrity, the importance of learning and the role that it will have in their life, and conversations that center on creating a learning environment that is based on trust and community and respect for one another, rather than on trying to figure out who did what. And I think we often don't have those conversations in our classrooms with our students, and we imagine that they understand what academic integrity is, and so on. That's where I would start personally.
Wonderful, thank you. We are out of time. Looks like we have more questions, but I don't think we can keep going forever. I would like to say thank you to all the panelists for being here today and offering their time. And this was a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. I will stop recording now.
Thank you, Lucas.